Clauses is another segment to sentence. Now what is a clause? A clause has either a dependent or an independent. These are the two kinds of clauses. But what is a clause? A clause is a group of words which has a subject and a verb, whether it's complete or not. Let's take a look at the first example. The main clause, otherwise called the principal clause or the independent clause, is a clause that does not need any support. It stands on itself. Okay, so I was late to work. It's an independent clause. He ran fast. Independent clause. He ran. Still an independent clause, though it has just two words. He, subject, ran, verb. So the meaning or the thought is complete. Now that makes it a independent clause. Let's look at the subordinate clause, otherwise called the dependent clause. The name itself speaks for itself. It is a dependent clause, which means it cannot stand on its own. It has to depend or on a main clause to make the meaning complete. So let's take a look at this example. Because I woke up late this morning, it hangs by itself. It's incomplete. The meaning or the thought is incomplete. But if I join this to this main clause, because I woke up late this morning, I was late to work. Now the thought is complete. So a subordinate clause or a dependent clause has to depend on the main clause or the principal clause or the independent clause. Let's take another example. When we arrived in class, again the thought is incomplete. It's a dependent clause. I need to link it to a main clause to make the meaning complete. So if I say, when we arrived in class, we had a surprise party. Now then the meaning is complete, and that proves that the subordinate clause always has to rely on a independent or a main clause. So here ends clauses. So let's do a quick recap of what we've covered under sentences as such. So we looked at the types of sentences or the kinds of sentences. We said there was an affirmative sentence or an assertive sentence, otherwise called as statements or declarations. These are basically statements expressed by the speaker believed to be true. And we looked at interrogative sentences. The main thing that we need to remember in an interrogative sentence is, irrespective of whether it's a WH question or how, it has to have a helping verb before the subject. Usually known as questions, is used to inquire unknown information. We looked at the third type of sentence, which was an imperative sentence expressing command, orders, requests, entreaties or precepts. And we looked at the last kind of sentence, which was an exclamatory sentence expressing some sort of emotion, usually followed with an exclamation mark. And then we looked at the subject and the predicate, which were the two parts of a sentence. How do we identify the subject? We identify the verb, add a question who or what to it, and there we have the subject. What is the predicate? The predicate is a part of the sentence which has the verb. So we know for a fact that a predicate cannot appear without a verb in it. We looked at phrases. We saw three phrases. We saw the noun phrase that functions like a noun, usually has does not have a subject and a verb. We looked at the adjective phrase, usually starts with a preposition or a participle and follows the noun that it is modifying. And we looked at the adverb phrase. We looked at a couple of examples which showed us the adverb phrase of time, place and manner. And last, we looked at clauses. We said a clause is a group of words that have a subject and a verb, and we looked at two different kinds of clauses: the main clause, principal or independent clause, which stands on its own. It does not have to rely on any other clause. And we looked at the subordinate or the dependent clause, which has to rely on the dependent clause to make the meaning complete. So here we have covered all the basics that are required in terms of just not parts of speech but also sentences, and we are geared up to go ahead and look at each of them in detail in the subsequent sessions.